last week on the show, we talked about blackface in culture in the 1920s. Um,
Yeah.
Maybe we should talk about, you said it was almost like a matter of fact, just very normal that the audience is supposed to take the treatment of the daughter of Myrna from her
Mm.
own father, um, as just like normal place,
Mm.
commonplace. I found that to be interesting because of the nature of violence that was thrust upon Myrna by her own father. And I
Right.
kind of was thinking to myself, like, not just in 2023, but you go back even, 2000s early, or even in the 90s. I don't know when the point was, but I don't believe if movies were made in the 70s or 80s, this is still the type of way we're showing distaste in what our daughter's performance is, even from the most grotesque type of parents. Now, I'm sure there's versions that slip my mind that exist, but it does, to me, this came off as like every film would showcase
Mm.
this type of violence against their daughters, wives, whatever, just, a masculine, hyper masculine man in the household. Uh, did you kind of get that same feeling then? And do you believe today they go about telling it in a different manner?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, today for sure, things have changed over the last, I mean, 10-ish years probably is when we really started thinking about these concepts in a little bit more depth, especially around violence towards women, and not just violence towards women, but violence towards marginalized communities. Right?
Right.
It could be gay or trans or any type of community that's marginalized. So I think you're right. I think one of the things I kind of lack knowledge on, and we kind of discussed this off air, but you know, when films were when film was first becoming, a product that was put in front of consumers, there was a lot more female directors and a lot more directors that it wasn't driven just by uh, male sensibilities or masculine sensibilities. So I wonder if there's some as things as things become more ingrained in the money making mechanisms, and male dominance kind of starts to take over some of these areas, especially around film. If maybe these types of movies where you have a male character that's willing to see his female love interest as equal and not just something to acquire, might
Right.
kind of start to dwindle out, and we start to get these hyper masculine, movies. But there's romance movies in the 30s and 40s and 50s. I mean, one of the best movies ever is Casablanca. So that's a fairly romantic movie about a man and woman falling in love. So long story short, I think you're right, that masculinity started to dominate how we told stories, and that kind of persists through the 90s and even into the 2000s. But as time went on, I think there started to be places where
Pushback.
yeah, where
Yeah.
yeah, where different types of voices started to get in, and now I mean, there's a real movement towards trying to make sure that all. I mean, if you watch the Oscars, there's a very strong push towards marginalized communities being able to make their films and have their voices heard. So
Yeah. I guess, is it, would it be oversimplifying it to say that it is a silent film, so everything's physical nature, that they added this because it's a physical, to kind of get the point across? Was there no way to express, you know, uh, disappointment in a daughter without the physicality coming from the father? Would that not come across? I mean, they do interject. I guess I'm asking a question that I already know the answer to in my own opinion. I just curious your thoughts on that. Is that oversimplifying it?
no, I would imagine there's probably some of that. I mean, I think again, I'm speaking from a place of kind of um, novice, right? I'm a novice in
Sure.
this stuff. I can't say much about films before the jazz singer, but like you know, there's two types of things happening in a movie, right? There's the people that are making the movie, and then there's the way that it's received, and like the way the world exists is at this time. I think it's commonplace to strike your daughter, to strike your son, to strike your wife, because that's just the way it is. When you're mad and you can't take it out on anybody else, the man comes home and takes it out on his family.
Right.
But then there's the creator, the what he's trying to say with this showing the violence is, I think he's trying to say like this is not how we should act. So I think yeah, I think there's something there for sure.
Point well taken. Point well taken, buddy. I think one thing just listening to what you said there that I kind of had this thought. Far too often I tend to think of like, you have the women's suffrage, you have the civil rights, movements, you have all these things, and you tend to think that life was always anti them or this prior, right? And then this happened, and then they got their liberties and their freedoms, and then, you know, they never
Right.
had it prior. But I don't know that that's necessarily how life is. I think there was peaks and valleys
Sure.
of when women, like we started off talking about how women were directing these films in the beginning of when this new art form when it first came out, and it wasn't until there was a power grab, right? And
Mhm.
then these kind of limitations on these minority groups kind of came into play. So it's not like life is like constantly on this upward trajectory. There's like moments and times throughout history where, you know, black people are considered free until they're considered slaves. And then, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I just think that was kind of like a eureka moment when you were talking there, that it hit me that it not life is not this. It's always been this. And who knows where
Yeah.
we are in the chapter of that. So
Revolution
interesting.
and counter revolution.
Say that again.
Revolution and counter revolution. It's
Okay.
how, yeah, it's how it goes, man. There's a group that wants to make changes and make the world a little bit more fitting for their group to be included in the rights and liberties of others, and then the people who strike back at that when there's some gains made. So, I mean, take it a little less political. I mean, you can see this in film, right? In the 80s, 90s, 2000s, where you have a sexual revolution, right? Where
Right.
people are becoming a little bit more open to sex on film, and you get your basic instincts for fatal attractions, and you get to see people nude on screen. And then, there's the counter revolution where you get pushback, and now it's very rare to see nudity on screen. So,
Yeah, I would say there's I don't know if it's a counter I would say it's counter revolution against comedy, and I think maybe it's starting to kind of make its way back a little bit. I feel like we've went through that, and now people are like, to me, you say counter revolution, I always say it's an overcorrection.
mm,
And not necessarily a bad thing, but like sometimes society, you can ask, you're not getting it. There's this overcorrection, and then it's kind of got to come back to a balancing point, and then whatever the next, topic of resistance or revolution that needs to be done, there's an overcorrection. So,
right.
whatever way you want to look at it, let's dive into the movie.